The lights above the Boston headquarters studio burned hotter than usual. Or maybe it was just my skin prickling under the weight of 55,000 unseen eyes. Screens glowed across 4 continents. Every employee, client, and investor tuned in to what had been advertised as Future Horizons, a new chapter for Atlasine Technologies. I sat at the front row table, headset on, waiting for my turn to present quarterly updates. Instead, Preston Aldwin leaned forward, his teeth gleaming in a smile sharpened for the kill. "Lucia Marine," he said into the microphone, his tone dripping with practiced authority. "Clear your desk. You're done. You're fired." For a second, silence swallowed me whole. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I forced my hands flat against the polished table. Behind the glass wall, the camera blinked red. I realized every flinch, every breath, was being broadcast in real time. Preston wasn't satisfied with the announcement. He tapped his tablet, and suddenly my inbox appeared on the massive shared screen. "This," he declared, scrolling through my messages, "is why innovation has stalled. Complaints, doubts, excuses." He clicked an email I'd written late at night, venting to myself more than to anyone else, words about exhaustion and being cut out of meetings. Then, in his haste to humiliate, he opened the attached file. I saw it before anyone else reacted, a confidential forecast presentation marked "Board Eyes Only." He must not have realized it was sitting in my drafts. Numbers and charts flashed for a fraction of a second before he closed it, but the chat sidebar erupted. Did anyone else see that sensitive data? My lips twitched into a smile so faint it could be mistaken for resignation. He thought he had stripped me bare, but in his arrogance, he'd torn his own armor. "Consider this your public termination," he added, checking his watch as though dismissing a servant. "Security will escort you out. 30 minutes to collect your things." I reached for my lanyard. My fingers trembled, though I held them steady as I unfastened the badge and set it on the table. I placed it carefully in front of me so the camera caught the gesture. My voice, when it came, surprised me with its steadiness. "Thank you for the opportunity," I said. "I wish Atlasine continued success." His smile faltered, only for a breath, but I caught it. He'd wanted tears, begging, rage. What he got was composure. The feed ended abruptly, the company logo replacing my face. My monitor went black. In the silence that followed, I heard the muted chatter of employees outside the studio, the shuffle of security waiting to escort me. I rose, smoothing my blazer, and walked out without looking back. The air felt colder in the hallway, and every pair of eyes that avoided mine told me exactly how deep Preston's shadow reached. Still, the memory of his slip, the confidential file flashing across the screen, warmed me like an ember I intended to keep alive. And that ember followed me as I stepped into the elevator, knowing my 6 years at Atlasine had just been reduced to nothing, or perhaps to something I had yet to reveal. The elevator doors closed, and with them, the last 6 years of my life seemed to collapse into a single, suffocating breath. As the numbers ticked downward, my mind went back to the beginning when Atlasine was little more than a desperate company clawing at survival, and I had been desperate enough to take a chance. At 28, I'd already known what it meant to lose everything. My first startup in Austin had been my pride, the idea that would prove I belonged in the tech world. But my co-founder disappeared with our seed funding and left me with a pile of debts and a reputation that smelled of failure. Investors stopped taking my calls. I left Texas carrying more shame than luggage, vowing to find somewhere I could rebuild. Atlasine Technologies wasn't glamorous. A mid-size firm based in Boston, it was bleeding clients and relevance. But in the interview, Preston had leaned forward. eyes blazing with words about breaking boundaries and disruption. I believed him, believed in what I thought was vision. When he told me he needed someone willing to tear things apart to make them better, I felt chosen. My first creation there was Crosslink, a communications platform stitched together from sleepless nights and stubborn faith. Within 8 months, client retention soared by 70%. That single product bought Atlasine breathing room and bought me the illusion that I'd found a place where my work mattered. The years that followed blurred into endless cycles of launches and revisions. I built a team of 15 developers, each one as stubborn and brilliant as I was. Together, we doubled the user base, secured contracts other companies had written off as impossible. At investor meetings, Preston would place a hand on my shoulder and call me his secret weapon. Cameras flashed, and I smiled, trying to ignore how his hand lingered a second too long. Outside the office, though, my life shrank. I broke off an engagement with a man who wanted Friday nights at home instead of Friday nights in front of a laptop. I rented a 1-bedroom in Somerville, simple enough to make my long hours feel justified. My paycheck traveled west each month to my mother, Teresa, in Santa Fe, helping cover the medical bills she never complained about, but always carried in her eyes. Somewhere along the way, Preston's admiration turned to something colder. Meetings began without me. Colleagues spoke in hushed tones about new directions. The same man who once paraded me as the face of innovation now acted as if I were ballast weighing him down. By the time the elevator reached the lobby, I understood the cruel arithmetic of my career. 6 years of 60-hour weeks, of broken promises and sacrificed love, had been reduced to nothing. And yet, even as I stepped into the rain-soaked street, another part of me whispered that nothing can also mean a blank page waiting for the first mark of something new. When Preston began cutting me out of strategy sessions, I told myself it was temporary. When he reassigned members of my team one by one under the excuse of balancing workloads, I tried to believe it was just restructuring. When he slashed my budget and left me defending skeleton proposals while he courted new clients with champagne, I understood at last. My value to him was never about partnership. It was about how much shine I could add to his name. So I made a choice. If he wanted to treat me as invisible, I would build my power in the shadows. Every bonus I received, every unspent dollar from the modest salary increases he grudgingly approved, went straight into Atlasine stock. It wasn't glamorous, not the kind of thing you post about on social media. It was quiet, incremental, almost invisible until it wasn't. While Preston bought his first Ferrari, I kept driving my dented Honda Civic, its left mirror held together with duct tape. He showed up to the office bragging about his Hamptons retreat, inviting only the executives he wanted photographed on his deck. I went home to my 1-bedroom apartment, reheated burritos from the corner store, and stared at the ticker symbol glowing on my laptop screen. Every time Preston stole credit for a product roadmap, I logged into my brokerage account and bought another block of shares. Every time he stood on stage describing my innovations as our collective vision, I added more. It was my own quiet form of rebellion, not loud, not fiery, but steady. I didn't tell anyone. Not my colleagues, not my mother, not the friends I occasionally still saw. To them, I was simply Lucia, the overworked head of product who dressed in the same navy blazer, hair pulled back, too tired to try for more. They didn't see the spreadsheets on my dining table or the satisfaction I felt watching my percentage inch higher, fraction by fraction. It was slow progress, and there were nights I doubted myself. Nights I wondered if I should give up and start fresh at another company, someplace less toxic. But then I would remember the Baker account, the way Preston had texted me to stand by while he delivered my pitch as his own, and I'd find the strength to hold on. By the time he fired me on that live stream, I no longer felt like someone disposable. My smile, faint and deliberate, wasn't about defiance alone. It was about knowing that while he saw me as replaceable, I held the one thing he could never replace, a growing share of the company he thought he owned. And that knowledge stayed with me as I walked out of headquarters that night. The rain still falling, my phone buzzing with messages I had no intention of answering, until one call would change everything. That night, my apartment felt smaller than ever. The box of belongings from my desk sat unopened by the door. My phone pulsed with messages, recruiters sniffing opportunity, colleagues offering sympathy, friends asking what really happened. I ignored them all. My attention stayed fixed on the laptop, where the SEC's website ticked toward its nightly update. At 8:21, the numbers refreshed. There it was, my latest purchase reflected at last. My name, Lucia Marine, beside a percentage that would make even Preston hesitate if he bothered to look. Before I could fully process the sight, my phone rang with an international number. "Good morning, ma'am," a gravelly voice said when I answered. "This is Jeffrey Harlow, chairman of Atlassign's board. I've just landed in Singapore." For a second, I couldn't breathe. No one called me ma'am, not in this world. "Good evening from Boston." I managed, though my pulse thundered. "I've reviewed the shareholder registry." Jeffrey continued. "Your position is substantial. I want you to join an emergency board meeting tomorrow. Your time. Will you be available?" I gripped the edge of my table. "Yes, I'll be ready." "Good. We'll send details in the morning." And Lucia, what happened today was unacceptable. "We'll discuss more tomorrow." The line clicked dead. I stared at my reflection in the darkened laptop screen, my own face looking back at me with something I hadn't seen in months' control. Preston thought he had written my ending. He had only set the stage for something else. Seconds later, another buzz. This time, a text from Preston. "Minor misunderstanding today. Let's discuss privately before things escalate. Breakfast tomorrow, my treat." I let the message sit unread, the glow of it taunting on the screen. He had no idea Jeffrey had called me first. No idea the board would hear my voice tomorrow. I closed the laptop, pushed the box of desk trinkets into the corner, and poured myself a glass of water. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about code or deadlines or saving Preston from his own mistakes. I was thinking about what I would say when 55,000 eyes were replaced by 13 board members, and Preston would have to hear me speak. The following afternoon, my screen filled with faces I had only seen in annual reports, 13 board members, each framed by their offices, libraries, or luxury hotel rooms. Their expressions were neutral, professional masks that revealed nothing. Then Preston appeared, perfectly groomed, confidence radiating through the camera like a man convinced the outcome had already been decided. "Let's be efficient," he began, clasping his hands. Lucia Marine's termination was a necessary leadership decision. Her skill set was valuable years ago, but the company has evolved. Innovation demands fresh leadership. The future of Atlassign depends on decisiveness, not clinging to outdated methods. He was good smooth, persuasive, as if I were a relic to be boxed and stored away. But Jeffrey's voice cut through before I could respond. "Correction. Preston. Lucia now owns 27% of Atlassign Technologies. That makes her the largest individual shareholder." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched as Preston's smirk stiffened, his jaw twitching as if the words had lodged in his throat. For once, he had nothing rehearsed to say. "Impossible," he muttered. She doesn't have the resources. The registry doesn't lie." Jeffrey said. "We're here to hear her as well." All eyes turned to me. My palms were damp, but my voice carried with a steadiness I'd cultivated through years of being spoken over. For 6 years, my department delivered every major innovation that fueled growth. Crosslink, Atlas Sync Pro, the integration suite products that built our reputation. Since being pushed out of those cycles, the launches have underperformed. The numbers are public, retention down, market share slipping. Innovation slowed the moment my team was dismantled. I shared my screen, walking them through timelines, graphs, metrics. My voice did not rise, did not break. Each slide was another stone laid at Preston's feet. When I finished, Jeffrey leaned back. The evidence is clear. The board will now vote on whether to affirm Lucia's leadership in an interim capacity while we reassess the company's direction. Names were called one by one. Yes, yes, yes. The pattern became undeniable. When the tally was final, Preston sat frozen, lips pressed thin. I had been appointed interim CEO. I didn't gloat. I didn't smile. I simply nodded, the weight of the moment pressing into my shoulders. Preston's eyes locked on mine through the screen, fury simmering behind his polished expression. He knew this wasn't over, and so did I. The meeting ended. The screens blinked dark, and for the first time, I carried a title he could no longer use against me. But I also knew his shadow hadn't left the building. The next morning, I walked back through Atlassign's glass doors, the same doors security had ushered me through only days earlier. Now, employees clustered in hushed knots, their voices breaking into murmurs as I passed. Silent coup. I heard whispered once, then again. My name hung in the air, equal parts curiosity and caution. I held my head high, though the weight of their stares pressed heavily. In the elevator, I caught my reflection, same blazer, same tired eyes, but the badge at my chest carried a new title, Interim CEO. My office awaited, larger, brighter, overlooking the Charles River. Yet I barely had time to sit before the door opened and Preston entered, his smile polished, but eyes burning. "I'll be around for the next 90 days, he said smoothly, as if we'd agreed to this. Strategic advisor. The board thinks continuity will reassure clients. The words were delivered casually, but the message was sharp. He was still here, still hovering, still capable of pulling strings. I nodded, hiding the flare of anger in my chest. Then let's hope you spend those 90 days adding value, I replied. Outside the office, I could feel the division. Some employees rushed to shake my hand, cautious but hopeful. Others kept their distance, waiting to see whether Preston or I would outlast the other. Their hesitation was a reminder, titles alone don't build trust. Later that afternoon, as I walked toward the elevator, a familiar voice stopped me. Lucia. I turned. Maya Sandoval, my old assistant, stood in a maintenance uniform, holding a clipboard. She'd been reassigned to facilities after Preston cut her from my team months earlier. Her eyes darted around before she spoke. He offered me money. She whispered, Preston. He wanted details about your schedule, your meetings. I told him no, but her voice faltered. He'll try again. You know he will. A cold steadiness settled over me. Maya had no reason to warn me, not after what the company had done to her. That she did spoke louder than any applause in a boardroom. Thank you, I said quietly. You did the right thing. Her nod was small, hesitant, before she slipped away down the corridor. Leaving me alone with the echo of her warning, I returned to my office, closing the door behind me, the city lights of Boston flickering against the glass. Preston's presence lingered like a shadow I couldn't escape, every corner of the building carrying the possibility of betrayal. And I knew then that leading Atlasine would demand more than vision. It would demand vigilance. Investor calls became my new battlefield. I spent nights poring over slide decks, rehearsing market forecasts, memorizing growth numbers. But as I studied the reports, something began to gnaw at me. Figures that should have matched didn't. Development costs spiked in quarters when my projects had already wrapped. Lines marked as consulting services drained millions with no clear return. I reached out quietly to Diane Rourke, head of internal audit, a woman known for her precision and silence. We met in the sub-basement archive room, surrounded by boxes no one had touched in years. I showed her the discrepancies. She didn't speak at first, just adjusted her glasses and nodded. "I'll get you access to deeper records," she said finally. "But if we're caught, they'll know where it came from." Preston, meanwhile, had not eased his campaign. He stalled directives I signed off, telling managers they were under review. He whispered to clients that the board had him guiding strategy, that I was still finding my footing. Every delay, every undermining remark was another reminder that I was sharing a roof with the man who had once humiliated me on camera. One evening, as I packed up after midnight, Maya appeared at my office door. She glanced both ways down the hall before slipping inside. From her jacket pocket, she pulled a small flash drive and set it on my desk. "I saved copies," she whispered. "Invoices from when I still had access to your department files. I knew they didn't look right, but I didn't know what to do with them. They point to the same consultancies Preston's been using." I stared at the drive, feeling the weight of it in my palm. For weeks, I had been assembling threads of suspicion, but this was fabric. "Proof. Thank you," I said, my voice steady though my heart raced. "This changes everything." When she left, I plugged it in and scrolled through scanned invoices, payment trails, names that repeated quarter after quarter, the same shell consultancies, the same inflated charges. And now, with dates and signatures, the picture came into sharp focus. The very numbers Preston thought would stay buried had become the weapon I would use against him. The annual shareholder meeting in Manhattan was supposed to be routine, a showcase of confidence and polished numbers. Instead, it became the stage for a reckoning. I stood at the head of the long mahogany table, 13 board members and a dozen investors, watching as I slid folders across the surface. Inside were invoices, ledgers, and cross-referenced payments over $7.4 million siphoned into shell consultancies. Every one of them tied to Preston's relatives or old associates. Preston laughed at first, a brittle sound. "This is absurd. She doesn't understand the complexity of high-level strategy. Those consultants provided valuable services. Really," I said, opening my own folder. "Because their listed offices don't exist. Their phone numbers connect to disconnected lines. Their websites were all created the same week their first payments were processed." Gasps rippled through the room. Jeffrey Harlow leaned forward, his brow furrowed. Diane Rourke rose from her seat, calm and deliberate. "We verified every detail. Miss Marin's findings are accurate. The funds were misappropriated." For the first time, Preston's composure cracked. His face flushed. His words came too fast. "This is a setup. She's manipulating numbers. She's desperate to hold on to a title she doesn't deserve." But no one was listening anymore. 2 men in dark suits entered quietly from the back, badges glinting. As the meeting adjourned, they escorted Preston out, his protests echoing against the marble walls. When the doors closed, silence settled. Jeffrey turned to me. "Lucia, the board has voted, effective immediately. The interim title is removed. You are the permanent Chief Executive Officer of Atlasine Technologies." I nodded, my throat tight. 6 years of diminishment, of stolen credit, of erasure, all rewritten in a single vote. That afternoon, I faced a live stream audience of 60,000. My reflection stared back from the camera, but this time it was on my terms. 2 days ago, I was fired before 55,000 people. Today, the world saw who really built this company. Our future will be transparent, our successes shared, and every voice recognized. The comments surged, messages of support flooding the sidebar as the stock ticker behind me climbed upward. And in that moment, I understood the sharpest revenge wasn't about destruction, it was about proving I belonged all along.